Hey, and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. This is Chad from Ascension Worship. This week I'm talking quick because I want to save you time. Today we are talking about 6 common DCA mistakes. Let's get to it.
Hey, what do you say? Yes, it's that time again. It's Tech Tuesday.
So our first common DCA mistake is using a bunch of random colors. As you can see in this example here, the colors are not so much randomized, but grouped based off of the function of each DCA. But I go to a lot of churches where every single one is a different color, and you have to read through them all to try and find what you're looking for. On here, the green ones, they can be any color, but I picked green, are more of my individual DCAs for like drums, for example, or for electric guitars. Over here, we have more of our what I call macro DCAs. These are controlling our entire worship team. So we've got the entire band and then the entire vocal team all on these 2 red DCAs. They're in the center and they're red because red attracts my eye. So when I'm looking for the entire team to fade them in or fade them out, for whatever reason, I don't have to read through everything. I know it's going to be those 2 even at a glance. The next common DCA mistake is not mixing your DCAs to unity. Now, if you've seen my videos in the past where I talk about mixing your faders to unity, I say that mixing individual faders to unity is actually a bad idea because of the way it affects your gain structure. DCAs are a different story though. What I would suggest is to not have your DCAs look like what you see on the screen here, but to instead, when you sound check, mix with your DCAs at unity for your worship team faders. And what you're going to do is you're going to mix your individual faders wherever they need to be for this to sound good during a big chorus, for example, where all the elements are present. And the idea is that you now have a visual marker that you can work from during the songs so that you can turn things up and down certain sections. But again, when you get to big chorus sections where everything's available, it's going to sound best when it looks something like this. For example, let's say you've got a song where the verses are just really busy. The electric guitars are covering up the vocals. Not a problem. During those verses, you can pull the guitars down a little bit so the vocals can cut through really well. And then when that chorus hits afterwards and everything's present again, you can push those guitars back up somewhere around unity, and you're going to have a pretty good idea that that's going to sound like what it did during rehearsal. This is also super useful if your soundboard is set up in like a balcony or some sort of other not ideal location. By setting your DCAs to unity during rehearsal, if you're mixing on the floor, then when you're back up in the balcony during the service, you have a pretty good idea that when your faders are at unity, especially when all the elements are going, that it's going to sound like it sounded like when you were doing rehearsal. And so it's going to give you a good start to work from. Now, this next one kind of hurts me a little bit, but let's be honest here. You do not need a DCA for bass guitar. What? I'm sorry. Usually you want to use DCAs for things that require multiple instruments, like the drums, for example. Usually 4 to 8 faders make up that DCA, or for things that you're going to need to turn up and down for leads, like an electric guitar. Bass guitar in the modern worship team generally does not fit those premises. Instead, what I would do is use an assignable knob or fader instead. But let's be honest, using a DCA for bass is usually kind of wasteful. Next is mixing all of your guitars into one DCA. And what I mean by that is mixing bass guitar, electric guitar, acoustic guitar. Now, all 3 of these are guitars. They all have strings on them, but their function in the modern worship team is very, very different. So usually what I would do is, like you can see in this example here, is have a DCA for electric guitar. Again, practically, electric guitar is usually multiple faders from either multiple musicians or maybe your guitars are in stereo, that kind of thing. And so it makes sense to be able to turn those up and down all together, especially when it comes to lead lines. But generally, again, for the normal modern worship team, this might be different for your team. Acoustic guitar and bass guitar, you're not really adjusting quite as much during those actual solo sections. So again, I would put them on a fader or an encoder instead of using a DCA. Next common mistake is mixing all of your effects down one DCA. Now, as you can see in this example here, I have a separate DCA for vocal reverb and for vocal delay. Now, it makes sense for me to have DCAs for vocal effects because you're going to probably be adjusting those quite a bit during the service. What I don't have on here is a DCA for the band reverb because usually once you set that, it's pretty much set for the rest of the service. So if I needed to scale back a little bit and have vocal verb and delay coming down one DCA, that might be okay because, again, those are both vocal effects. But what you don't want to do is mix your vocal and band effects down the same DCA. For example, let's say that your worship pastor comes up to read a verse and you don't want any effects on their voice. You want to be able to pull down 1 or 2 DCAs to make that happen, but you don't want to lose that magical reverb that you're hearing on the snare drum and the acoustic guitar. So that's why you want to keep those two things separate. Finally, another common thing I see in churches is having a DCA for media. So maybe your pre and post service music, maybe the audio coming from ProPresenter. Again, there's not a lot of faders involved in that. It's not like a drum kit. So usually I find it's a little bit wasteful when you can have, again, an assignable encoder or fader instead. Usually there's other band elements that I think would be more important to have a DCA on there. For the most part, media is going to be the beginning of the service, the end of the service, and maybe a sermon bumper video. So I feel it's unnecessary to have a DCA for that. All right, guys, real quick, here's what we have in this example. You can see we have drums. This might be drums or might be drums and bass, depending on how I'm feeling on that. Otherwise, the bass will be in the band DCA. Then we have electric guitars. Again, acoustic guitars will be part of the band DCA. Then we have keys and tracks. This would be either keys and tracks, or just tracks. It really depends on how well the tracks are mixed from song to song, if I need to be able to grab them up and down all together or not. If I have a free DCA, usually one of the first things I will split off is having keys and tracks separate. But if not, they can go pretty well together usually. Again, the band DCA is everything we just talked about and anything else that didn't fall into those categories. This is all the musical elements of the worship team. Vox, this is going to be all the singing microphones on stage. Then in purple here, we have vocal verb and delay. Now, personally, I have the vocal verb affecting the vocal verb return faders so that it won't affect the band's in-ears. However, the delay I have on the send of the delay. This allows you to do ramping effects. Really fun. If you haven't tried it, give it a try. Finally, this is something I've been doing for the past year or so, is using a speech DCA. This is especially useful on boards like the X32 where you have a spill function, or if you just have a lot of speech microphones. It's nice that you can kind of control them all in one location because you really don't want to miss a mic call. That said, if you're on a board like the Behringer Wing, where you've got those 4 assignable faders on the right-hand side, I will oftentimes put those individual faders over there and use this DCA for something like tracks if I have that option available to me. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If you have something else that you guys do that works well for you, I'd love to hear that as well. Until next time, have a great week. Again, this is Chad from Ascension Worship. I hope this has been helpful for you and your team. Come back here every Tuesday for new information.